Hi, how are you doing? I'm Thundercloud here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. Welcome to Chillin Tuesday on the 9th of July, 2024. And yeah, you know what my mum calls me. That's James. Yeah, washing away the garbage, leaving rainbows after rains. Let's do some Chillin Tuesday linguistic games. Ooh, what have we got for let's begin with the weather, because the weather here currently in Guyra is 9.8 degrees Celsius. And it feels like 5.8 outside. Overnight, they're expecting a few showers with a minimum of 4. Tomorrow's maximum is 12. And then coming up during the week here in Guyra, well, it'll be 4 to 12, 0 to 13 on Thursday, 2 to 11 on Friday, and 3 to 9, partly cloudy on Saturday, and 0 to 10 on a Sunday morning with, -1 to 6 degrees. Next Monday. Oh, how very, very, very exciting that one. A nice cold day coming up. Yes, cool. I love cold, yeah. Right, I love hot. I love all the weather. I'm Thundercloud, and wouldn't I love it forever? Yeah. All right, tonight I'm going to mix it up, but I am going to mostly focus on Banjo Paterson's poetry from the year 1892 through 1893. It was quite I wouldn't say it was a prolific year, but it was definitely a year that he wrote some really good poems that were published anyway, that we know of. So maybe it was a prolific year. Who knows? He maybe wrote a lot of other stuff as well. As that, I am going to be reading a few Les Murray poems interspersed in between Banjo Paterson's poetry, just because I thought I'd make it a bit more interesting tonight. Now, the following poem was prompted by Henry Lawson's poem Borderland, but this one is called by Banjo Paterson In Defence of the Bush. And yeah, there was a bit of a back and forward argy-bargy going on. They never came to fisticuffs, but yeah, it was sort of like an answer poem. And I guess Henry Lawson, well, I guess if you want to consider him a kind of poet, you might consider him a Gothic bush poet, and Banjo was more a romantic bush poet. So, but that's due to their backgrounds. One coming from a really working class background, Henry Lawson, also being a depressive alcoholic, and Banjo coming from a more upper crust background as a solicitor and journalist, of course, and having a very positive, optimistic outlook on life. In Defence of the Bush by Banjo Paterson. So, you're back up from the country, Mr. Lawson, where you went, and you're cursing all the business in a bitter discontent. Well, we grieve to disappoint you, and it makes us sad to hear that it wasn't cool and shady and there wasn't plenty beer. And the loony bullock snorted when you first came into view. Well, you know it's not so often that he sees a swell like you. And the roads were hot and dusty, and the plains were burnt and brown, and no doubt you're better suited drinking lemon squash in town. Yet, perchance, if you should journey down the very track you went, in a month or two at furthest, you would wonder what it meant, where the sun-baked earth was gasping like a creature in its pain. You would find the grasses waving like a field of summer grain, and the miles of thirsty gutters blocked with sand and choked with mud. You would find them mighty rivers with a turbid sweeping flood, for the rain and drought and sunshine make no changes in the street, in a sullen line of buildings and the ceaseless tramp of feet. But the bush hath moods and changes, and the seasons rise and fall, and the men who know the bushland, they are loyal through it all. But you found the bush was dismal and a land of no delight. Did you chance to hear a chorus in the shearers' huts at night? Did they rise up William Riley by the campfire's cheery blaze? Did they rise him as we rose him in the good old droving days? And the women of the homesteads and the men you chanced to meet, were their faces sour and saddened like the faces in the street? And the shy selected children, were they better now or worse than the little city urchins who would greet you with a curse? Is not such a life much better than the squalid street and square where the fallen women flaunt it in the fierce electric glare, where the sempstress plies her sewing till her eyes are sore and red, where in a filthy, dirty attic, toiling on for daily bread? Did you hear no sweeter voices in the music of the bush than the roar of trams and bushes and the war whoop of the push? Did the magpies rouse your slumbers with their carol sweet and strange? Did you hear the silver chiming of the bellbirds on the range? But perchance the wild bird's music by your senses was despised, for you say you'll stay in townships till the bush is civilised. Would you make it a tea garden on a Sundays, have a band where the blokes might take their donors with a public close at hand? You had better stick to Sydney and make merry with the push, for the bush will never suit you and you'll never suit the bush. You can really see the optimism and the positiveness and also the derision of Henry Lawson, how he really did look down upon him by the sound of that. That's just my opinion anyway. The Ballad of G.R. Dibbs. This is the story of G.R.D., who went on a mission across the sea to borrow some money for you and me. This G.R. Dibbs was a stalwart man who was built on a most extensive plan and a regular staunch Republican. But he fell in the hands of the Tory crew, who said it's a shame that a man like you should teach Australia this nasty view. From her mother's side she should ne'er be gone, and she ought to be glad to be smiled upon and proud to be known as our hanger-on. And G.R. Dibbs, he went off his peg at the swells who came for his smiles to beg, and the Prince of Wales who was pulling his leg. And he told them all when the wine had flown, the Australian has got no land of his own, his home is England, and there alone. So he strutted along with the title band, and he sold the pride of his native land for a bow and a smile and a shake of the hand. And the Tory drummers, they sit and call, send over your leaders, great and small, for the price is low, and we'll buy them all. With a tinsel title and a tawdry star of a lower grade than our titles are, and a puff at a prince's big cigar. And the Tories laugh till they crack their ribs when they think of how they purchased G.R. Dibbs, published in the Bulletin on the 1892. Now, the Ballad of G.R. Dibbs, he was Sir George Richard Dibbs, 1834 to 1904, was the Premier of New South Wales. At this time, this poem was written. It was early in his political career, and he had espoused republicanism, but as the poem points out, he had now reversed his position, and during a visit he made to England in 1892, he was knighted by Queen Victoria, becoming a KCMG, whatever that may mean, a knight of something, who knows. The next one, an answer to various bards. This one, an answer to various bards. Edward Dyson was a contemporary poet and a regular contributor to the Bulletin. A little Arvie was a fictional character in a short story by Henry Lawson. There was no ill feeling in these verses. Paterson and Lawson had agreed to write a series of verses, each describing bush life from his own viewpoint. Paterson later acted as Lawson's solicitor in negotiation with publishers Angus and Robertson. An answer to various bards by Banjo Paterson. Well, I've waited mighty patient while they all came rolling in. Mr. Lawson, Mr. Dyson, and the others of their kin, with the dreadful, dismal stories of the overlanders' camp, how his fire is always smoky and his boots are always damp. And they paint it so terrific it would fill one's soul with gloom, but you know they're fond of writing about corpses and the tomb. So before they curse the bushland, they should let their fancy range and take something for their livers and be cheerful for a change. Now, for instance, Mr. Lawson, well, of course, we almost cried at the sorrowful description of how his little Arby died. And we wept in silent sorrow when his father's mate was slain. Then he went and killed the father, and we had to weep again. Ben Duggan and Jack Denver too, he caused them to expire, and he went and cooked the gander of Jack Dunn of Never Tire, and he spoke in terms prophetic of a revolution's beat when the world should hear the clamour of those people in the street. But shearer chaps who start it, why, he rounds on them in blame, and he calls them agitators who are living on the game. So no doubt the bush is wretched if you judge it by the groan of the sad and soulful poet with a graveyard of his own. But I overwrite the Bushman. Well, I own without a doubt that I always see a hero in the man from furthest out. I could never contemplate him through an atmosphere of gloom, and a Bushman never struck me as a subject for the tomb. If it ain't all golden sunshine where the wattle branches wave, well, it ain't all damp and dismal, it ain't all lonely grave. And of course there's no denying that the bushman's life is rush, but a man can easy stand it if he's built of sterling stuff, though it's seldom that the drover gets a bed of eider down. Yet the man who's born a bushman, he gets mighty sick of town, for he's jotting down the figures and he's adding up the bills while his heart is simply aching for a sight of southern hills. Then he hears a wool team passing with a rumble and a lurch, and although the work is pressing, yet it brings him off his perch, for it stirs him like a message from his station friends afar, and he seems to sniff the ranges in the scent of wool and tar. And it takes him back in fancy, half in laughter, half in tears, to a sound of other voices and a thought of other years, when the woolshed rang with bustle from the dawning of the day, and the shear blades were a-clicking to the cry of wool away, when his face was somewhat browner and his frame was firmer set, and he feels his flabby muscles with a great feeling of regret. Then the wool team slowly passes and his eyes go sadly back to the dusty little table and the papers in the rack, and his thoughts go to the terrace where his sickly children squall, and he thinks there's something healthy in the bush life after all. But we'll go no more a-droving in the wind or in the sun, for our fathers' hearts have failed us and the droving days are done. There's a nasty dash of danger where the long-horned bullock wheels, and we like to live in comfort and to get our regular meals, and to hang about the township suits us better, you'll agree, for a job at washing bottles is the job for such as we. Let us herd into the cities, let us crush and crowd and push till we lose the love of rosing and we learn to hate the bush. And we'll turn our aspirations to a city life and beer, and we'll sneak across to England. It's a nicer place than here, for there's not much risk of hardship where all comforts are in store, and the theatres are plenty and the pubs are more and more. But that ends it, Mr. Lawson, and it's time to say goodbye. We must agree to differ in all friendship, you and I, and our personal opinions, well, they're scarcely worth a rush, for there's some that like the city, and there's some that like the bush, and there's no one quite contented, as I've always heard it said, except one favoured Paterson, and he turned out to be dead. So we'll work our own salvation with the stoutest hearts we may, and if fortune only favours, we will take the road some day, and go droving down the river, 'neath the sunshine and the stars, and then we'll come to Sydney and vermillionise the bars. That was published in the Bulletin on the 1st of October, 1892. Well, the next one is called The Boss of the Admiral Lynch, and I'm guessing the Admiral Lynch or the Almirante Lynch, a small gunboat referred to as a torpedo catcher, commanded by Captain Fuentes, who supported President Balmaceda during the Chilean Civil War. The Almirante Lynch was responsible, together with the Almirante Condell, for sinking of the opposition flagship, the Blanca Encalada, in April 1891. And I guess back in the day, that would have been right around the world on the news wire, so they would have read about that in the newspaper. The boss, the Admiral Lynch. Did you ever hear tell of Chile? I was reading the other day of President Balmaceda and of how he was sent away. It seems that he didn't suit them. They thought that they'd like a change, so they started an insurrection and chased him across the range. They seem to be a restless people, and judging by what you hear, they raise up revolutions about 2 or 3 times a year. And the man that goes out of office, he goes for the boundary quick. For there isn't no vote by ballot, it's the bullets that does the trick. And it ain't like a real battle where the prisoners' lives are spared and they fight till there's one side beaten and then there's a truce declared. And the man that has got the licking goes down like blooming lord to hand in his resignation and give up his bloomin' sword. And the other man bows and takes it, and everything's all polite. This wasn't that kind of a picnic. This wasn't that sort of a fight. For prisoners they took, they shot 'em, no odds were they small or great. If they'd collared old Balmaceda, they'd reckon to shoot him straight. A lot of blood-thirsty devils they were, but there ain't a doubt. They must have been all real plucked uns, the way they fought it out. And the king of them all, I reckon, the man that could stand a pinch, was the boss of a one-horse gunboat. They called her the Admiral Lynch. Well, he was for Balmaceda, and after the war was done and Balmaceda was beaten and his troops had been forced to run, the other man fetched his army and proceeded to do things brown. He marched them into the fortress and took command of the town. Cannons and guns and horses trooping along the road, rumbling over bridges, and never a foeman showed, till they came inside of the harbour, and the very first thing they see was this mite of a one-horse gunboat a-lying against the quay. And there, as they watched, they noticed a flutter of crimson rag, and under their eyes he hoisted old Balmaceda's flag. Well, I tell you, it fairly knocked 'em. It just took away their breath. For he must have known if they caught him, 'twas nothing but sudden death, and he got no fire in his furnace, no chance to put out to sea. So he stood by his gun and waited with his vessel against the quay. Well, they sent him a civil message to say that the war was done, and most of his side were corpses, and all that were left had run, and blood had been spilt sufficient, so they gave him a chance to decide if he hauled down his bit of bunting and come to the winning side. He listened and heard their message, and he answered them all polite that he was a Spanish hidalgo, and the men of his race must fight. A gunboat against an army, and never a chance to run, and them with their 100 cannon, and him with a single gun. The odds were a trifle heavy, But he wasn't the sort to flinch, so he opened fire on the army, did the boss of the Admiral Lynch. They pounded his boat to pieces. They silenced his single gun. They captured the whole consignment, for none of them cared to run, and it don't say whether they shot him. It don't even give his name, but whatever they did, I'll wager that he went to his graveyard game. I tell you those hidalgos, so stately and so polite, they turn out the real McGuinness when it comes to an uphill fight. There was General Alcantara, who died in the heaviest brunt, and General Alzareca was killed in the battle's front. But the king of 'em all, I reckon, a man that could stand a pinch, was the man who attacked the army with the gunboat, Admiral Lynch. Yeah, he sure was a bit of a legend there, wasn't he? Eh? All right, I'm going to go on to a Les Murray poem now. And I just thought, well, why not? Hey, this one we were just looking at reading a war one there, and this is called The Drugs of War by Les Murray, who died in 2019. And this is from his book, Learning Human, the selected poems of Les Murray. The Drugs of War. On vinegar and sour fish sauce, Rome's legions stemmed avalanches of whirling golden warriors, whose lands furnished veterans' ranches. When the warriors broke through at last, they'd invented sour mash, but they took to sugared wines and failed to hold the lands of hash. By beat of drum, in the wars of rum, flogged pleasant boys faced front, and their warrior chiefs conversed coolly, attired for the hunt. And tobacco came in a pipe of peace, but joined the pipes of war, as an after smoke of battle, or over the maps before. All alcohols, all spirits, lost strength in the trenches, that belt-fed country. Then morphine summoned warrior dreams in ruined and would-be gentry. Stewed tea and vodka and benzodrine helped quell that mechanized fury. The side that won by half a head then provided judge and jury. In the acid war, the word was score. Rising helicopters cried smack, smack. Boys laid a napalm trip on Earth and tried to take it back. But the pot boiled over in the rear. Fighters tripped on their lines of force, and victory went to the supple, hard side, eaters of fish sauce. The perennial war drugs are made in ourselves, sex and adrenaline, blood and the endomorphias that transmute defeat and pain, and others hardly less chemical, eagles, justice, loyalty, edge, and Judas, face of every idea, and the fish that ferments in the brain. Les Murray, The Drugs of War. This one's Les Murray, Nocturne. Brisbane night gathered far away. Estuarine imagery city, of houses towering down one side, of slatted light seen under leaves. Confluence of ranginess with lush Brisbane of rotogravure memory, approached by web lines of coke and grit, by sleepers racked in corridor trains. Weatherboard in Cantory City, of the timber Duchess, the strapped port in Auchenflower and Fortitude Valley, and bottle top spat in Vulture Street. greatest of the flood time towns that choked the dictionary with silt and hung a navy in the tropic gardens, Brisbane on the steep green slope to war. Brothel human headquarters city, where commandos and their allies fought down cafe stairs, belt buckle and boot, and once with a rattle-trap green gun. In midnight nets, in mango bombings, Brisbane storied and cable fixed. Above your rum river, farewell and adieu, in marble on the hill of Toowong. By golfing pockets, by deep squared pockets, night heals the bubbled tar of day, and the crab moon, rising, reddens above Brisbane, rotating far away. It's Les Murray's Nocturne. Well, coming up here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame, I'm really excited to announce I've got 4 weeks of Poetry Slam workshops every Wednesday afternoon, Wednesday evening from 6 o'clock from the 17th of July right through till the 14th, I think, of August, when we've got the Australian Poetry Slam heat here in August on the 15th of August. So I'm very excited to announce that, but if you've been following on, you would have already known that. Also, Fiore Musicali will be coming back to Gyra and the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame with a Latin American selection on the 21st of September. So I'll be looking forward to that one as well. Don't forget, the Australian Poetry Film Festival is open for submissions. Get into it right now because there are 3 different categories: Best Australian Poetry Film, Best Australian Bush Poetry Film, and Best Student Poetry Film. Check it out on www.filmfreeway.com/Australian Poetry Film Contest. The next one I've got for you here is The Man from Ironbark by Banjo Paterson. It was a man from Ironbark who struck the Sydney town. He wandered over street and park, he wandered up and down. He loitered here, he loitered there, till he was like to drop, until at last, in sheer despair, he sought a barber shop. Here, shave me beard and whiskers off. I'll be a man of mark. I'll go and do the Sydney toff up home in Ironbark. The barber man was small and flash, as barbers mostly are. He wore a strike-your-fancy sash and smoked a huge cigar. He was a humorist of note and keen at repartee. He laid the odds and kept a tote, whatever that may be. And when he saw our friend arrive, he whispered, "Here's a lark. Just watch me catch him all alive, this man from Ironbark." There were some gilded youths that sat along the barber's wall. Their eyes were dull, their heads were flat, they had no brains at all. To them the barber passed a wink, his dexter eyelid shut. "I'll make this bloomin' yokel think his bloomin' throat was cut." And as he soaped and rubbed it in, he made a rude remark. "Oh, I suppose the flats is pretty green up there in Ironbark." A grunt reply was all he got. He shaved the bushman's chin, then made the water boiling hot and dipped the razor in. He raised his hand, his brow grew black. He paused a while to gloat. Then he slashed the red-hot razor back across the victim's throat. Upon the newly shaven skin it made a livid mark. No doubt it fairly took him in, the man from Ironbark. He fetched a wild up-country yell, might wake the dead to hear, and though his throat he knew full well was cut from ear to ear, he struggled gamely to his feet and faced the murderous foe. "You've done for me, you dog-on Pete. One hit before I go. I only wish I had a knife, you blessed murdering shark, but you'll remember all your life this man from Ironbark." Well, he lifted up his hairy paw. With one tremendous cloud he landed on the barber's jaw and knocked the barber out. He set to work with nail and tooth. He made the place a wreck. He grabbed the nearest gilded youth and tried to break his neck. and all the while his throat he held to save his vital spark. And "Murder! Bloody murder!" yelled the man from Ironbark. A peeler man who heard the din came in to see the show. He tried to run the Bushman in, but he refused to go, and when at last the barber spoke and said, "Oh, 'twas all in fun, 'twas just a harmless little joke, a trifle overdone." "A joke?" he cried. "By George, that's fine, a lively sort of lark. I'd like to catch that murdering swine some night in Ironbark." And now, while round the shearing floor the listening shearers gape, he tells the story o'er and o'er and brags of his escape. "Them barber chaps, what keeps a tote? By George, I've had enough. One tried to cut me bloomin' throat. Thank the Lord it's tough." And whether he's believed or no, there's one thing to remark, that flowing beards are all a go way up in Ironbark. And that was published in the Bulletin on the 17th of December, 1892. The next one here, the Bushman's Song, was published on Christmas Eve, the 24th of December in the Bulletin. The Bushman's Song by Banjo Paterson. "I'm travelling down the Castlereagh and I'm a station hand. I'm travelling with the rope and pole, I'm handy with the brand. And I can ride a rowdy colt or swing the axe all day, but there's no demand for a station hand along the Castlereagh. So it's shift, boys, shift, there isn't the slightest doubt that we've got to make a shift to the stations further out, with the pack horse running after, for he follows like a dog. We must strike across the country at the old jig-jog. Well, this black horse I'm riding, if you'll notice what's his brand, he wears the crooked R, you see none better in the land. He takes a lot of beating, and the other day we tried for a bit of a joke with a racing bloke for £20 a side. It was shift, boys, shift, for there wasn't the slightest doubt that I had to make him shift, for the money was nearly out. He handed home a winner with the other one at the flog. He's a red hot sort to pick up with his old jig-jog. I asked a cove for shearing once along the Martha Guy. We shear non-union here, says he. I call it a scab, says I. I looked along the shearing, for before I turned to go, there were 8 or 10 dashed Chinamen a shearing in a row. It was shift, boys, shift, for there wasn't the slightest doubt it was time to make a shift with the leprosy about. So I saddled up my horses and whistled to my dog, and I left this scabby station at the old jig-jog. I went to Illawarra, where my brother's got a farm. He has to ask his landlord's leave before he lifts his arm. The landlord owns the countryside, man, woman, dog and cat. They haven't the cheek to dare to speak without they touch their hat. It was shift, boys, shift, for there wasn't the slightest doubt their little landlord God and I would soon have fallen out. Was I to touch my hat to him, was I his bloomin' dog? So I makes for up the country at the old jig-jog. But it's time that I was moving, I've got a mighty way to go, till I drink artesian water from 1,000 feet below, till I meet the overlanders with their cattle coming down, and I'll work a while till I make a pile, then have a spread in town. So it's shift, boys, shift, for there isn't the slightest doubt we got to make a shift to the stations further out. The pack horse runs behind us, for he follows like a dog, and we cross a lot of country at the old jig-jog. Yeah, well, there we go. The Bushman's Song, published in the Bulletin, 24th of December, 1892 by Banjo Paterson. Oh, here we go. We got one here called The Duties of an Aide-de-camp. And this was published on the 1st of January, the 21st of January, 1893. Oh, some folk think viceroyalty is festive and hilarious. The duties of an ADC are manifold and various, so listen while I tell in song the duties of an aide-de-camp. Here we go. Whatsoever betide to the governor's side, we must stick, or the public would eat him. For each bounder we see says, just introduce me to his lordship, I'm anxious to meet him. Then they grab at his paw and they chatter and jaw, till they'd talk him to death if we let him. And the folk he has met, they are all in a fret, just for fear he might chance to forget him. When some local King Billy is talking him silly, or the pound keeper's wife has waylaid him, from folks of that stamp, when he has to decamp, where his aides to decamp, so we aid him. Then some feminine beauty will come and salute you. She may be a miss or a madam, or a man comes in view, bails you up, how d'ye do, and you don't know the fellow from Adam. But you've got to keep sweet with each man you meet, and a trifle like this mustn't bar you. So you clutch at his fin and you say with a grin, oh, delighted to see you, how are you? Then we do country shows where some prize taker blows of his pig a great fast 40 stoner. See, my lord, ain't he fine? How is that for a swine when it isn't a patch on its owner? We fix up the dinners for parsons and sinners and lawyers and bishops and showmen, and a judge of the court we put next to a sport and an orangeman next to a Roman. We send invitations to all celebrations, some nobody's presence entreating, and the old folks of all we invite to a ball, and the young to a grandmother's meeting. And when we go dancing like cart horses prancing, we plunge where the people are thickening, and each gay local swell thinks it's off to dance well, so he copies our style, and it's sickening. Then at banquets we dine and swig cheap, nasty wine, but the poor aide-de-camp mustn't funk it. And they call it champagne, but we're free to maintain that he feels real pain when he drunk it. Then our horses bestriding, we go out a-riding, lest our health by confinement we'd injure. You can notice the glare of the governor's hair when the little boys say, go it ginger. Then some wandering lords, they so often are frauds, this out-of-way country invading. If a man dresses well and behaves like a swell, then he's somebody's cook masquerading. But an out-and-out arse with a thirst for the glass and the symptoms of drink on his bocco, who is perpetually pursuing the ballet, he is always the true Orinoco. We must slave with our quills, keep the cash, pay the bills, so account of the liquor and victuals. So I think you'll agree that the gay ADC has a life that's not all beer and skittles. That was published in the Bulletin on the 21st of January, 1893. All right, the next one I've got for you is called Behind the Scenes, published on the Bulletin the 8th of April, 1893. The actor struts his little hour between the limelight and the band. The public feel the actor's power, yet nothing do they understand. Of all the touches here and there that make or mar the actor's part, they never see beneath the glare the artist striving after art. To them, it seems a labour slight. To them it seems a labour slight. When naught of study intervenes, you'll see it in another light when once you've been behind the scenes. For though the actor at his best is like a poet born not made, he still must study with a zest and practice hard to learn his trade. So whether on the actor's form the stately robes of Hamlet sit, or as Macbeth he rave and storm, or plays burlesque to please the pit, 'tis each and all a work of art that constant care and practice means the actor who creates a part has done his work behind the scenes. Yeah, that's very true. There's a lot of work involved in memorizing poems and plays and that kind of stuff, like days and weeks of just repetition and going over and over and over. But it's very much worth it in the end. So yeah, the secret to learning a poem off by heart is repeating it over and over and over and over until you remember it. That's all. Reconstruction. From a farmer's point of view, this poem refers to the failure of the banks. In 1893, a bill declared banks' IOUs legal tender, and their assets were transferred to new reconstructed banks. Reconstruction. From a farmer's point of view. So, the bank has bust its boiler, and in 6 or 7 years it will pay me all my money back, of course, but the horse will perish waiting while the grass is germinating, and I reckon I'll be something like the horse. There's the ploughing to be finished, and the ploughmen want their pay, and I'd like to wire the fence and sink a tank, but I own I'm fairly beat how I'm going to make ends meet with my money in a reconstructed bank. It's a safe and sure investment, but it's one I can't afford, for I've got to meet my bills and pay the rent. And the cash I had provided, so these meetings have decided, shall be collared by the bank at 3%. I can draw out half my money, so they tell me from the Crown, but it's just enough to drive a fellow daft. My landlord's quite distressed by this bank, he's very pressed, and he'll send me up to pay his overdraft. There's my nearest neighbour, Johnson, owed this self-same bank a debt. Every feather of his poor old back they plucked, for they set to work to shove him, and they sold his house above him. Lord, they never gave him time to reconstruct. And their profits from the business have been 25%, which I reckon is a pretty tidy whack. And I think it's only proper, now the thing has come a cropper, that they ought to pay a little of it back. I have read about reserve funds, banking freeholds and the like, till I thought the bank had thousands of assets. And it strikes me very funny that they take a fellow's money when they haven't got enough to pay their debts. And they say they've lent my money and they can't get paid it back. I know their rates percent were 10s and 12s. And if now they've made a blunder after scooping all this plunder, why, they ought to fork the money out themselves. So, all you bank shareholders, if you won't pay me what you owe, you'll find that on your bank will fall a blight. And the reason is because it's simply certain that deposits will be stopped. The bank will bust, and serve you right. The Bulletin, the 17th of June, 1893. All right, the next one's called When Dacey Rode the Mule. It was in a small up-country town when we were boys at school. There came a circus with a clown and with a bucking mule. The clown announced the scheme they had. The mule was such a king, they'd give a crown to any lad who'd ride him round the ring. And gentle reader, do not scoff, nor think the man a fool. To bark up porous plaster off was pastime to that mule. The boys got on, he bucked like sin, then threw them in the dirt, and then the clown would raise a grin by asking, were they hurt? But Johnny Dacey came one night, the crack of all the school. Said he, I'll win the crown all right, bring in your bucking mule. The elephant went off his trunk, the monkey played the fool, and all the band got blazing drunk when Dacey rode the mule. But soon there rose an awful shout of laughter when the clown, from somewhere in his pants, drew out a little paper crown. He placed the crown on Dacey's head, while Dacey looked a fool. Now there's your crown, my lad, he said, for riding on the mule. The band struck up with Killaloe and Rule, but Tanya Rule, a young man from the country too, when Dacey rode the mule. Then Dacey, in a furious rage for vengeance on the show, ascended to the monkey's cage and let the monkeys go. The blue-tailed ape and chimpanzee, he turned abroad to roam. Good faith, it was a sight to see the people step for home. The big baboons with canine snout are spiteful as a rule. The people didn't sit it out when Darcy rode the mule. And from the beasts that did escape, the Bushmen all declare, were born some creatures partly ape and partly native bear. They're rather few and far between, the race is nearly spent, but some of them may still be seen in Sydney Parliament. And when those legislators fight and drink and act a fool, it all commenced that wretched night when Dacey rode the mule. Published in the Bulletin on the 8th of July, 1893. Well, the next one's a really lovely one. It's called Black Swans. As I lie at rest on a patch of clover in the western park when the day is done, I watch as the wild black swans fly over, with their phalanx turned to the sinking sun. And I hear the clang of their leader crying to a lagging mate in the rearward flying, and they fade away in the darkness, dying where the stars are mustering, one by one. Oh, ye wild black swans, 'twere a world of wonder for a while to join in your westward flight, with the stars above and the dim earth under, through the cooling air of the glorious night. As we slept along on our pinions winging, we should catch the chime of a church bell ringing, or the distant note of a torrent singing, or the far-off flash of a station light. From the northern lakes, with the reeds and rushes, where the hills are clothed with a purple haze, where the bellbirds chime and the songs of thrushes make music in the jungle maze, they will hold their course to the westward ever, till they reach the banks of the old grey river, where the waters wash and the reed beds quiver in the burning heat of the summer days. Oh, ye strange wild birds, will ye bear a greeting to the folk that live in the western land? Then for every sweep of your pinions beating, ye shall bear a wish to the sunburned band, to the stalwart men who are stoutly fighting with the heat and drought and dust storms smiting, yet whose life somehow has a strange inviting when once to the work they have put their hand. Facing it yet, oh my friend stout-hearted, for what does it matter for rain or shine, for the hopes deferred and the gain departed? Nothing could conquer that heart of thine, and thy health and strength are beyond confessing, as only joys that are worth possessing. May the days to come be as rich in blessing as the days we spent in the auld lang syne. I would fain go back to the old grey river, to the old bush days when our hearts were light. But alas, those days, they fled forever. They are like the swans that have swept from sight. And I know full well that the strangers' faces would meet us now in our dearest places, for our day is dead and has left no traces, but the thoughts that live in my mind tonight. There are folk long dead, and our hearts would sicken, we would grieve for them with a bitter pain. If the past could live and the dead could quicken, then we might turn to that life again. But on lonely nights we would hear them calling, we should loathe the life with a hate appalling. In our lonely ridges by the ridge and plain, in the silent park is a scent of clover, and the distant roar of the town is dead. And I hear once more as the swans fly over their far-off clamour from overhead. They are flying west by their instinct guided, and for man likewise is his fate decided, and griefs apportioned and joys divided by a mighty power with a purpose dread. The Sydney Mail, 22nd of July 1893, that was first published. Banjo Paterson's Black Swans. The next one is called the All Rightin', as the All Right One, but it's apostrophe UN, All Rightin'. He came from further out, that land of heat and drought and dust and gravel. He got a touch of sun and rested at the run until his cure was done and he can travel. When spring had decked the plain, he flitted off again as flit the swallows, and from that western land, when many months were spanned, a letter came to hand which read as follows. Dear Sir, I take my pen in all hopes that all your men and you are hearty. You think that I have forgot your kindness, Mr. Scott. Oh no, dear sir, I'm not that sort of party. You sometimes bet, I know. Well, now you'll have a show, the books to frighten, up here at Wingadee, young Billy Fife and me, where training strife and he is a all rightin'. Just now we're running bys, but sir, first time he tries, I'll send you word of, and running on the crook, their measures we have took. It's the deadest hook you ever heard of. So when we lets him go, why then I'll let you know, and you can have a show to put a mite on. Now, sir, my leave I'll take. Yours truly, William Blake. P.S. Make no mistake, he's a all rightin'. By next week's Repairian, I saw my friend had been a bit too cunning. I read the racehorse strife and jockey William Fife disqualified for life, suspicious running. But though they spoilt his game, I reckon all the same I fairly ought to claim my friend a whiten, for though he wasn't straight, his deeds would indicate his heart at any rate was all rightin'. The Bulletin, 5th of August 1893. The next one's a little quick one called Tom Collins. Tom Collins, who never drinks and never bets, but loves his wife and pays his bets and feels content with what he gets. Tom Collins, who has the utmost confidence that all the banks now in suspense will meet their paper 3 years hence? Tom Collins, who reads the Herald leaders through and takes the evening news for true and thought the Echo's jokes were new? Tom Collins, who is the patriot renowned so very opportunely found to fork up Dibbs's £1,000. Tom Collins. The Bulletin, 19th of August 1893. The Great Calamity by Banjo Paterson. Macpherson came to Whiskey Hut when summer days were hot, and bidded there with Jock McThirst, a brawny brother Scott. Good faith, they made the whiskey fly like Highland chieftains true, and when they drank the beaker dry, they sang, "We are nae fou. There is nae folk like Goring folk say gallant and say true. They sang the only Scottish stroke, which is, we are nae foo. Said bold MacThirst, let Saxons jaw about their great concerns, but bonny Scotland beats them, the land of cakes and burns, the land of partridge, deer and grouse. Fill up your glass a beg, there's muckle whisky i' the house, for boy what's in the keg. And here a hearty laughy laughed, just come with me a beg. Macpherson saw with pleasure daft a 50-gallon keg. Lush, man, that's grand, Macpherson cried. So ever man the like. Now we the daylight I maun ride to meet a southern stike. But I'll be back ere summer's gone, so bide for me I beg. We'll make a grand assault upon yon devil of a keg. When Macpherson rode to Whiskeyhurst, when summer days were gone, and there he met with Jock MacThirst, was greeting all alone. MacThirst, what gars ye look sae blank? Have all your wits gone daft? Has that accursed Southron bank called up your overdraft? Is all your grass burnt up with drought? Is wool and hides gone flat? MacThirst replied, good friend, in truth, 'tis muckle waur than that. As Sire Macpherson cursed your life, that you should weep sae free, is harm upon your bonny wife, the children at your knee, is saith upon your house and home. MacThirst upraised his head. My bands, I done the deed of shame, 'twere better they were dead. To think my bonny infant son should do the deed of guilt. He let the whisky spigot run, and the whisky spilt. Upon them both these words did bring a sullen silence deep. Good faith, it is a fearful thing to see two strong men weep. The Bulletin, the 19th of August 1893. The next one's called Last Week, and this was published on the 16th of December 1893 in the Bulletin. The new chum went to the back block run, but he should have gone there last week. He tramped 10 miles with a loaded gun, but of turkey or duck he saw never a one. For he should have been there last week, they said. There were flocks of them there last week. He wended his way to a waterfall, and he should have gone there last week. He carried a camera, legs and all, but the day was hot and the stream was small, for he should have gone there last week, they said. They drowned a man there last week. He went for a drive and he made a start, which should have been made last week. For the old horse died of a broken heart, so he footed it home and he dragged the cart, but the horse was all right last week, they said. He trotted a match last week. So he asked the business who came from far to visit the town last week, but if they'd dine with him, and they said, hurrah, but there wasn't a drop in the whiskey jar. You should have been here last week, he said. I drank it all up last week. That was published in the Bulletin on the 16th of December, 1893. All right, this is next one I've got is definitely one of Banjo's most famous, one of his most famous. It's called the Bush Chritening. On the outer Barcoo, where the churches are few and men of religion are scanty, on a road never crossed, except by folks that are lost, one Michael McGee had a shanty. Now, this Mike was the dad of a 10-year-old lad, plump, healthy and stoutly conditioned. He was strong at the best, but poor Mike had no rest. The youngster had never been christened. And his wife used to cry, if the darling should die, St. Peter would not recognise him. But by luck, He survived till a preacher arrived who agreed straight away to baptize him. Now, the artful young rogue, while they held their collogue with his ear to the keyhole, was listening, and he muttered in fright while his features turned white, "Oh, what the devil is all of this christening?" He was none of your dolts. He had seen 'em brand colts, and it seemed to his small understanding if the man in the frock made him one of the flock, it must mean something very like branding. So, away with a rush, he set off for the bush, while the tears in his eyelids they glistened. "'Tis outrageous," says he, "to brand youngsters like me. I'll be dashed if I stop to be christened." Like a young native dog, he ran into a log, and his father, with language uncivil, never heeding the priest, cried out in his haste, "Come out and be christened, you divil." But he lay there as snug as a bug in a rug, and his parents in vain might reprove him, till his reverence spoke. He was fond of a joke. "I have a notion," he says, "that'll move him. Poke a stick up the log, give the spalpeen a prog, poke him aisy, don't hurt him or maim him. 'Tis not long that he'll stand, I've the water in hand, as he rushes out the end, I'll name him. Here he comes, and for shame, you've forgotten the name. Is it Patsy or Michael or Dennis?" Here the youngster ran out, and the priest gave a shout, "Take your chance anyhow with McGuinness." And the howling young cub ran away to the scrub, where he knew that the pursuit would be risky. As the howling young cub ran away to the scrub, where he knew that pursuit would be risky, the priest, as he fled, flung a flask at his head that was labelled McGuinness's Whiskey. And McGuinness McGee has been made a JP. And the one thing he hates more than sin is to be asked by the folk who have heard of the joke how he came to be christened McGuinness. Published in the Bulletin on the 16th of December 1893 by Banjo Paterson. All right, Frying Pan's Theology. Scene on Monaro, dramatis personae, shock-headed blackfellow, boy on pony. Snowflakes are falling, so gentle and slow. Youngster says, "Frying pan, what makes it snow?" Frying pan confident makes the reply, "Shaken big flour bag up in the sky." What, when there's miles of it? Surely that's brag. Who is there strong enough shake such a bag? What parson telling you, old Mr. Dodd? Tell you in Sunday school, big fella God. He drive his bullock dry, then thunder go. He shake his flour bag, tumble down snow. So frying pan's theology. Why does it snow? Okay, well, we've got two to go. The Ghost of the Murderous Hut, and then the G-Bung Polo Club, which is quite violent, really, because it's about a polo game where they kill each other. They all are left dead. The Ghost of the Murderous Hut. My horse had been lamed in the foot in the rocks at the back of the run, so I camped at the murderer's hut at the place where the murder was done. The walls were all splattered with gore, a terrible symbol of guilt, and the blood stains were fresh on the floor where the blood of the victim was spilt. The wind hurried past with a shout. The thunderstorm doubled its din, as I shrank from the danger without and recoiled from the horror within. When lo, at the window a shape, a creature of infinite dread, a thing with the face of the ape, and with eyes like the eyes of the dead, with the horns of a fiend and a skin that was hairy as Satyr or Ralph, and a long pointed beard on its chin. My God, 'twas the devil himself. In anguish I sank to the floor. With terror my features were stiff, till the thing gave a kind of a roar, ending up with a resonant biff. Then a cheer burst aloud from my throat, for the thing that my spirit did vex was naught but an elderly goat, just a goat of the masculine sex. When his master was killed he had fled, and now by the dingoes bereft, the nannies were all of them dead, and only the billy was left. So we had him brought in on a stage to the house where in style he can strut, and he lives to a fragrant old age as the ghost of a murderer's hut. The Bulletin, 30th of December, 1893. And the last one here, this was the G-Bung Polo Club, published in the Antipodean on the 18th, in 1893. All right, let's begin. The G-Bung Polo Club by Banjo Paterson. It was somewhere up the country in the land of rock and scrub that they formed an institution called the G-Bung Polo Club. They were long and wiry natives from the rugged mountainside, and the horse was never saddled that the G-Bungs couldn't ride. But their style of playing polo was irregular and rash. They had mighty little science, but a mighty lot of dash, and they played on mountain ponies that were muscular and strong, though their coats were quite unpolished and their manes and tails were long. And they used to train those ponies wheeling cattle in the scrub. They were demons, were the members of the G-Bung Polo Club. It was somewhere down the country, in a city's smoke and steam, that a polo club existed called the Cuff and Collar Team. As a social institution, 'twas a marvellous success, for the members were distinguished by exclusiveness and dress. They had natty little ponies that were nice and smooth and sleek, for their cultivated owners only rode them once a week. So they started up the country in pursuit of sport and fame, for they meant to show the G-Bungs how they ought to play the game. And they took their valets with them just to give their boots a rub ere they started operations on the G-Bung Polo Club. Now, my readers can imagine how the contest ebbed and flowed when the G-Bung boys got going. It was time to clear the road, and the game was so terrific that ere half the time was gone, a spectator's leg was broken just from merely looking on. For they waddied one another till the plain was strewn with dead, while the score was kept so even that they neither got ahead. And the cuff and collar captain, when he tumbled off to die, was the last surviving player. So the game was called a tie. When the captain of the G-Bungs raised him slowly from the ground, though his wounds were mostly mortal, yet he fiercely gazed around. There was no one to oppose him, all the rest were in a trance, so he scrambled on his pony for one last expiring chance. For he meant to make an effort to get victory to his side, so he struck at goal and missed it, and then he tumbled off and died. By the old Campaspe River, where the breezes shake the grass, there's a row of little gravestones that the stockmen never pass, for they bear a crude inscription saying, "Stranger, drop a tear, for the cuff and collar players and the G-Bung boys lie here." And on misty moonlight evenings, while the dingoes howl around, you can see their shadows flitting down that phantom polo ground. You can hear the loud collisions as the flying players meet, and the rattle of the mallets and the rush of ponies' feet, till the terrified spectator rides like blazes to the pub. He's been haunted by the spectres of the Geebung Polo Club. Wow. Okay. Now, if you've been liking this, go on, give it a thumbs up, leave a comment, and also don't forget to subscribe so you can be notified of what's coming up here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame and what other beautiful poems I am reading out to you. Tomorrow night we've got a Wednesday Words here, our open mic poetry night here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. And every Saturday morning we have a Gyra market here. So if you're a stall holder and you are looking for a place to market your wares, whether you make cakes or craft or sell fruit, vegetables, produce, anything, it's only $10 a table here at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. Gyra market every Saturday morning. All right, I got one more for you now. This is called a Triolet. It was published in the Bulletin on the 13th of January 1894. A Triolet. Of all the sickly forms of verse, commend me to the Triolet. It makes bad writers somewhat worse. Of all the sickly forms of verse that fall beneath the reader's curse, it is the feeblest jingle yet. Of all the sickly forms of verse, commend me to the Triolet. Well, yeah, he didn't like triolets, did he? All right, well, I am Thundercloud. If you've been liking this, thank you, and I'll see you next week. I'm washing away the garbage, leaving rainbows after rains. Yes, you know who I am, James. That's what my mum's called me. Look, I'm in here in the Seahorse Medicine Cafe at the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. Check us out on www.australianpoetryhalloffame.com. There's also merchandise for sale there. And there's also merchandise for sale on Meanwhile in Australian, all one word.com. Yeah, and it all supports the Australian Poetry Hall of Fame. All right, I'm Thundercloud and I'm out of here. Boom!